Welcome to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. I'm so excited today to have Dr. Red Hoffman here in the studio with us. She is a surgeon, hospice doctor, writer, and speaker. And she has a great deal of life experience, professional experience, and wisdom to share with us today. So welcome to the podcast, Red.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Frances May. I've been loving watching your journey, and I'm really grateful that you've been sharing it with us because I think it's really needed.
Thank you so much. I get that. I know it's not for everyone, and I think of the funny old tweet, which is like, some people are very demure, they'll just go on these difficult journeys and never complain about it. And it's like, I will do hard things, complain loudly about it the entire time. It's funny because you need all types, you do need people who are all types, right?
There's something about being in pain, but being able to moan loudly and let others share that pain, that's very therapeutic, I think, for ourselves
Exactly.
and for others.
100%. So catharsis, totally agree with you. Number two, also just the fact that if we want to address the pain point, if everyone's just silently eating it and squashing it down, then no one's going to magically come and address or reduce that pain point. So it does take some amount of us saying, oh, we'll call a spade a spade. We have to
Yep.
acknowledge this is even happening. So wonderful. Well, I cannot wait to get into it. I'd love if you would just start by giving us some of your background, your journey to where you're at professionally today before we dive deeper into your story.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Red Hoffman, and I actually started my life as a naturopath and a yoga teacher. And then during a interesting trip to Mumbai, India, decided I wanted to be a surgeon. So came back to the United States, finished my naturopathic training, applied to medical school, and didn't get in the first time, which I always share because I think that's one of my life lessons is, you don't always get what you want the first time around, and that's okay. And my other life lesson early on is it's okay to change your mind. Like I was very invested in this other career and invested a lot of money and time and recognized it wasn't the right thing for me. And so I did get into medical school and knew going in that I was very interested in surgery, partially because my father had been killed. So I was like very interested in trauma surgery and also just very interested in death and dying, and was able to, through a lot of trial and error, decide that I wanted to do both surgery and hospice and palliative medicine. And so I did, lots of training, I think 8 years of postgraduate training at the end, and ended up in a really great place in my life doing mostly acute care surgery, that mix of trauma, surgical critical care, and emergency general surgery, and doing some hospice work as well, and doing a lot of speaking all over the world, and really felt like I was set. And then, like many people that you've had on your podcast, the world's kind of my world kind of imploded. And my year of implosion was 2020. So while the world was imploding with COVID, my world was imploding with my partner had a fall and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And I ended up with getting COVID and then long COVID during that time. And then my partner died by suicide. And by May of 2021, my life looked totally different.
I'm so sorry for your losses.
Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing with us. But first, the loss of your father at just 19, you've shared. Is that
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
that's very young, of course. And
Yes.
then the loss of your partner. My heart goes out to you, and truly, I agree with you that sharing these experiences, even some of the thought process behind it, right? Because some people may have watched you at a very far distance or come to know you now in your latest era, and they think, wow, amazing. She must have just popped out this way. Probably always wanted to be a doctor, probably always life looked like this. I think that especially when I was younger, I really looked at people who I admired at like this type of professional stage, things like that. Very easy to say, okay, I'm in a rush to get there. Why don't I look like this? And I assume it was always like really easy. And weirdly, we always tend to overestimate, I think, how easy things are for other people. And so the
Yeah.
more that people are willing to share honestly, which is there's all sorts of twists and turns and implosions, things out of our control, acts of God. I think that the better that we do, even for like the next generation coming up, because then they see something more realistic and less beautiful with a fake facade.
Yeah, I'd say life was very, very, and it still tends to be messy, but I mean, very messy for me, particularly the 10 years after my dad died. I think like many women, I kind of ended up like somaticizing a lot of my emotions because I didn't have the language to talk about them. And I also didn't necessarily have the people in my life to receive what I wanted to say because my dad's death was such an odd story, especially at that time. And so that manifested in a lot of illness and a very long battle with eating disorder. And so like it was I was very messy. I'm sometimes I'm say like I'm amazed I'm alive and that like I can show up today, but it didn't always look like this at all. Like I was and I'm in my 50s now. It took me a long time to get to where I am. And I have often felt like I'm 10 years like I've shown up 10 years late to my life because I went back to school late. I didn't go to medical school until I was 33. I lost a lot of years to an eating disorder. And like, I've had to just come to realize like no one's keeping track except me. There's no showing up late for your life. Here I am today. But I do like to share like it wasn't a straight line and that's okay. Every time I am around a mentee or even like one of my practice partners who's changing their mind, I always say, I'm so proud of you that you're making a change. Cause I think and you obviously can speak to this, Frances May, but I think change is like the most courageous thing we can do. And I've made a lot of them, and most of them have been good for me.
So well said. The corollary to that, it's funny because I'm definitely a person who has always been afraid of change, very resistant to change. And so what I would posit is not only do I agree with you and change is good, it's definitely, even if I can't convince you that it's good and useful and probably makes us better and more interesting and it allows us to find iteratively better alignment throughout our life, but resisting change, which is inevitable, is very painful. So,
Yes.
I feel like I would pitch it to people that way, like, "Oh, I get it. Some of us are resistant to change, we don't love it on face, but, like, what if I told you fighting it is just going to be, like, very drawn out and painful for you?" Then I think it kind of is another way to go walk around and approach it from the other side, the inevitability. Not only that, but I think that what's so interesting with medicine specifically is that we do assign some kind of feature to the work of the physician. And so, therefore, even you going to medical school at 33, like, that's amazing that you did that. I would imagine that a lot of people celebrated it, and even if people hear that story, a woman had one kind of career, her life looked one way in her 20s, and then at 33 realized she wanted to go to medical school, become a surgeon. We applaud that, and yet there's some kind of, like, moral failure. You're not allowed to leave, though. And
Yeah.
to me, I really am trying to direct the conversation into a place where you are allowed to change as many times as you need to. You're allowed to change your mind, change your job as many times as you need to. Coming into medicine is beautiful and important. And I love that. Like I'm very happy when I hear of people later in life choosing medicine as a second act career. I don't agree that it's inherently better than going from medicine and choosing, industry as a second act
Right.
career. Because at the end of the day, to your point about change, it's like if we end up somewhere that's a much better alignment, then I think we should all be cheering for that.
Percent. Yeah. It's really interesting. I remember, and I'm sure you've heard this too. I think I might have heard you say this at some point too, but I remember at some point, even during residency, struggling with like, am I really meant to do this? And I remember a friend saying to me, like, well, you can't just like leave like, I think it was in my fourth year thinking about it. Well, then you like wasted a spot. Someone else could have been in this spot the whole time. And like, you know what? To me, that's very magical thinking, the same way it was
Yeah.
magical thinking when I would think, would I want my dad alive or would I want to be a trauma surgeon because I really became one because he was killed? And I'm like, what the world doesn't work like that. And it's the same thing. I didn't take a spot from anyone. This was my spot for this time. I did a lot of free work for the hospital, gave a lot of great care. And if I want to leave, I am going to leave. I chose to stay. But there's a lot of like false equivalencies we tend to make or that others make on our behalf that they're false.
Love that. I love that you called that out. Unfortunately, a lot of people making those types of arguments and accusations, they don't know what false equivalencies are.
Yeah.
So, to an extent, I think it's good to stay out of the weeds. And I just, I think that I love the old quote, which is the more you love your decisions, the less you need others to love them.
I
And
love
so
that.
I'm not and, of course, I'm not out here I'm not trying to talk doctors into leaving, and
Right,
that's what's funny too is that's also a misnomer though, right? Like, me sharing my journey is not going to ever convert a person who's in the right job and the right career to not like their career anymore. It might catch a couple people who felt anything like me, which is, okay, I made a mistake, not the
right.
right career. We're going to go somewhere else. I would love if you could speak to, you mentioned, of course, your life, professional career, training and education that you had, plus work that you did prior to medicine. And so, again, people will come and they'll say, are you sure you want to go into medicine now? Like, you're going to be throwing away all the time, money, opportunity cost of working. So, my question is, do you feel that you gained experience, wisdom, skill sets from your 20s, from your first act career that have been useful to you beyond in second and third acts, things like that? And if so, what were they? Like, if you can speak to
Sure.
that experience and what's transferable.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's never a waste of time. We bring all of ourselves to like everything we do, which I just love. I would say I learned, my 20s was very much about my own like health journeys, which of course I think have well, not of course, but have made me like more empathetic. I can like sit with so many people who are having issues that maybe my partners wouldn't necessarily want to be sitting with, which is fine. But also because I did this other career as a naturopath, I think I brought I always say, like, I just bring this real juicy side to surgery that you don't often see. One of the first things we learned in naturopathic school was the first thing to do is put your hands on the patient. And so what's very interesting to me is like every time I walk in the room, I don't know why, I end up at like usually at the patient's the foot of their bed, touching their feet. I'm always rubbing people's feet, but I think it's or I'm sitting on their bed or I have my hand on their chest. Like I really think just that connection with patients or family members when I'm talking to them is so important. So I kind of brought that along. I think I also brought along a real understanding of what makes me happy and what doesn't. So when people are going into some more alternative forms of medicine, a lot of those people, they don't end up working in the hospital. They end up being small business owners. And what someone would have asked me at the beginning, if they would have asked me, Red, do you want to be a small business owner? I would have said no, that's not my skill set. And then I probably wouldn't have become a naturopathic physician. So I had a better idea of when I was going into medical school and residency, what kind of job would resonate with me. And
Hmm.
what I ask, like when I work with medical students now is I always say, it's not about like what you want to be. How do you even know? It's like, what practice location is going to make you happy? Like, are you most happy in clinic working nine to
Yes.
five, or do you love the hustle and bustle of the hospital and all the craziness that goes with it? And that's really the first kind of fork in the road that we deal with. And so I wish someone would have asked me that before I went to naturopathic school, because I would have been like, no, I love being surrounded by people in chaos all day. I don't like that in my home life, but I love that in my work life. And that gives me a lot of energy to get through the day. So I think I brought a lot more clarity than I had. I brought clarity also because I was older, but I brought clarity into this second career that I didn't have in my first career.
Yes. That is instrumental. I really do think because and I can identify with what you're saying because last year at 33, that's when I made the decision to pivot out of clinical medicine. And I just know myself much more than the 0% amount that I knew myself in
Yes.
my 20s. So the fact that I didn't pick the right career for me to spend 60 years in, I even have to forgive myself for that a little bit. I did
Yeah.
not know myself. I even wanted to mention that, your loss of your father when you were 19, and I'm so sorry you alluded to it being, violent and unexpected. We lost my dad when I was 20. It was a sudden cardiac event, so it was unexpected in that
Yeah.
regard, but I can even relate, like, I was an only child. I lost my dad. I had lost one of my grandmas who raised me just a year before to pancreatic cancer. Then I lost my other grandma who also raised me to Lewy body dementia. So I had 3 out of my 4 immediate family members who I lost in a teeny short window of time, and, I do think that I spent my 20s pretty disconnected and numb, And, again, this goes back to I was just not with it. I think that there was a
Yep.
lot of grief. It's not uncommon for those of us in medicine, especially since I went almost straight through. Like, my dad died 1 month before I hit the interview trail for medical school.
Right.
I never took any time off of my job, like, they just gave me the 2 days to go to the funeral and get back. Didn't take any time off, didn't take any sabbaticals, went through interviews, didn't talk about losing my dad on the interviews, interestingly, except for at the school I ended up going to. The interviewer there,
Ugh.
she ended up we got on that topic. But I do, of course, I think experiencing grief at that young age. Some
It's
people might appreciate 19 or 20 as being young, but that's much younger than all my contemporaries, lost their parents and things like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me from the time I was 12 to 19, I lost all of my grandparents and my dad. So 5 deaths in a
I'm
row, and
sorry.
I think that was part of the reason my 20s were really challenging is, like, trying to metabolize that grief. And yeah, I mean, the reality is sure, is 19, 20, that's not I have friends who lost their parents when they were, 5, 10
Yeah,
years old, much younger. But the reality is even when you're in your late teens and your young 20s, the problem becomes is you still don't have the words to articulate all of these big feelings you're feeling. You don't have that yet. And so it it gets bottled up. It might get expressed in different ways because, like, we're older and can create a little more chaos than you can when you're 5 or 10, but it's still the same problem. It's like, I think a lot of things get very stuck at that age.
absolutely. Well, and I appreciate you sharing again some of these transferable skills. It's fascinating because I don't know a lot of surgeons who will touch like that, like what you're describing. And yeah, I shake hands when I meet people, but in terms of, wow, the last time I touched a foot, that takes me back. Well, and I'm an ENT too, so it's like I really just that
You
is not
really
my
shouldn't be
instinct.
touching a foot, maybe.
Yeah, but even if I walked in
Yeah.
and they're in bed, like, that's so lovely. That
Yeah.
does feel very, like, authentic and grounding to me, so I love that. I think that that's an interesting concept, and it's like, maybe if I was still doing inpatient type of care, like, I think that that's a great way to make a connection with someone. We were not taught that, I haven't seen that modeled, but that's a cool example.
It is funny because my residents, even, like, when I was, like, a more senior resident, my younger residents, one who stayed, my good friend, always tells me, like, that's what she learned from me to touch people's feet, and I really try to, like, show my residents, like, it's okay to
Yeah.
sit on the bed and love on someone, and it's very interesting that, there's always a lot of issues with any hospital you work in, but one of the things that my hospital did great is there's, like, a chair on like, kinda hanging on the wall of every room so that there's always a chair
Oh.
to sit in, and, like, also because of chronic illness, like, I've dysautonomia, so I can't with dysautonomia, you can't stand up and stand still, like, I can walk and be fine, but if I'm standing up and standing still, it's very hard for me to, like, process a lot, and so, like, I love to sit down,
Mm,
so I'm always, like, telling them, "I'm just gonna sit down," but really it helps me too, it just helps me concentrate and be more present, you know?
100%. No,
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and so, that does bring us to I would love if you would share what you're comfortable with about, like, this current act. I'm not sure if formally this could be called almost like your 3rd act,
Yeah.
but yeah, everything that you're doing now and also the health journey that you have been on. And of course, I agree with you that when the doctor experiences any health journey, of their own, even the one that you did in your 20s, like, I mean, it makes them a better doctor. I find some doctors, they really have a harder time connecting with the patient or relating to the patients because they've just never had a sick day
Yep.
and they do not get it. And they shut down sometimes their patients.
Yeah. Well, I was in the midst of caretaking my partner who had a traumatic brain injury and I got COVID. And I'm not surprised I ended up with long COVID because my stress level was like the worst stress of my life while I was caretaking for him and still working. I just never got better. And then he committed suicide. And I think like that kind of just that level, then the stress skyrocketed. And so it just, I think, put my nervous system into like such a state of fight or flight that I almost feel like it just like set the stage for me just not being able to heal in a way I wish I could have. But in the end, I ended up with getting diagnosed with dysautonomia, a form of dysautonomia called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which if you start talking to people, a lot more people have it than we
Mhm,
would know.
mhm.
Though I will say I didn't know what it was before I got it because I'm sure we had like one half an hour on it in medical school that I forgot. And then I ended up with mast cell activation syndrome, which often lives alongside that. And both of those really manifest a lot with chronic fatigue and just having a hard time, which is very interesting as a surgeon, standing up and standing still, being very sensitive to heat, which is also hard in the OR because for the non-medical people, a lot of times our patients have a heater on them to keep them warm. So it's
Mhm.
like, and then the lights are on you. So it's made practicing very interesting. It's interesting because I listened to the podcast you had with your OB-GYN.
Dr. Pearson?
Yes, I
Stephanie
listened to that
Pearson's? Yes.
podcast and I was really listening and well, one, we had like an interesting corollary, which just like her, I did not recognize the importance of having own occupation disability insurance. So I'm going to echo what she told all of your listeners. And I used to say like, oh, I think you need to have this by the time you leave residency. And now I feel like you should have it while you're in residency. And I
Yeah.
remember like, I understand. Like, I was that poor resident, really living paycheck to paycheck. But, like, if there is any way to find the money to get this disability insurance, because it is the best investment. And it is one of the biggest regrets of my life that I did not have it. And it still makes me sad. And I heard sadness in her voice too. And I just have to, like, let it go. What I
May I
was able,
ask, you didn't have it
yes,
as an
no,
attending as well? Oh, wow.
I had
Or
short-term
through the
disability.
hospital?
Yeah, but it's not the same at all. I
Mhm.
was
No, no,
grateful
no,
that
no, no.
I was out for 6 months and I had short-term disability, and I was very grateful for that, and had long-term disability if I had needed to use it, but it
Mhm.
didn't. But it's very different than I'd be making. My financial world would look completely different if I had
Yes.
own occupation because I went down to point 0.5 clinically. So
Mm.
someone would have been covering that. Um, what I was able to do is when I went back to work, my work was very kind. I told them I can only come back as point 0.5. I was out for 6 months after my partner died dealing with long COVID. And I very clearly recognized there is no way I'll ever be a full-time surgeon again. I just spend so much time recovering after my shifts. But what
Mhm.
I was able to do was I was able to pivot because I have always felt that like diversification is like, well, when it's important, it's important for your financial life, for your friend life, for so many areas of life. But it also, diversification for me brings me joy. Like the one thing I don't want is for my life to look the same every day. And so I
I
had
get
always
that.
had my hands in a lot of different pots, partially because I said yes to a lot of things. And a lot of those yeses turned into paid gigs eventually, not at the beginning. And because I was able to build some social capital over the years that I had been at my job. And so I was really able to like make up that other point 0.5 with doing all this admin work that like brings me a lot of joy because it allows me to problem solve for other physicians in the hospital, allows me to build bridges, it allows me to use my hospice and palliative medicine training, which is so important to me, but it still allows me to operate. So I never would have thought that my career would have looked like this, and I never could have planned it. And I would have also said, Frances May, like, I'm not that creative, so I don't know that I would have been able to like manifest this if you had asked me, what do you want it to look like? But it did unfold over time because, again, I had set myself up by saying a lot of yeses early in my career, not for no other reason except I was like interested. I'm like, I want to sit at that table. And eventually, they want you there too.
That's amazing, and definitely a great point because I think what I didn't appreciate and maybe other people don't know until it happens to you is, like, a lot of these things are not paid at first,
Yes.
which that even makes sense though, because like, frankly, the first couple websites that I made, which again, not paid, I mean, you're building the skill set, like, it always is to fully can identify with what you're saying, which is that it's fun, like, it is fun to do something different, and I love graphic design, like, I actually have a lot of fun learning how to use Illustrator, designing on my computer, playing with Figma. That is fun for me.
Right.
But of course, it is also nice to build a skill set so that you are in a position to pitch and make money using that skill set. But I can't emphasize enough, like, especially as physicians, it is really hard to not get paid 1.0 FTE for your work. So it's almost like this foreign concept of it's been so long since we were back in the truly unpaid, build up a brand new skill set. But guess what? Like, most of us don't have the design or the tech or AI skills, right? Like, but you can
Or the
build them.
leader or the
Yeah, what
leadership
the
or
leadership,
the business.
communication.
Like,
Yeah.
yep, all those things. And, my mom has always she's been so I joke because, like, she's a Jewish mom. Of course, she wants me to make money, right? But she's also always told me, like, to appreciate getting to, like, sit and get free learning. And so when, one of my jobs
Wow.
started, because a friend of mine who was, like, a female leader in our, company said, "Red, you gotta start come to the meetings. There's, like, no other women." So she dragged me, and I got to meet the CMO, who became a great mentor of mine. And, like, after a year and a half, he created this position for me, which is kind of unheard of in my company. He never would have done that except that I proved myself. And to me, it wasn't like I go back and forth because, like, now I don't know how much I
Wow.
believe. And I'm like in my 50s. I'm like, I don't really want to do that much free work anymore. But I was doing free work today because there's another opportunity that I'm not ready for, that I may be ready for in a year or two. But the guy's not going to just hire me. Like, he needs me to show up and show that I have something to offer. And I had a great morning sitting in on these meetings. Like, it brought me joy and I have the time. So, like, that's how I chose to use it. And so I think everyone has that threshold of, like, there's some things in my department that I say no to. There's some things that I will do, but I will only do to get paid. And then there's some things, like sitting this morning, that will pay off in the future that I'm willing to, like, do for free. And everyone has to decide that for themselves.
Exactly. I second that. I have the same 3 buckets, and I think that you're hitting on, again, something people need to hear, which is that role that you said that the CMO created for you after a year and a half, like, that wasn't listed as a job.
No.
That's not a job anyone can apply for. So there is this interesting, and I know it takes patience, creativity, showing up and proving yourself, and all of that can be a lot of effort, can be
Mhm.
tedious at times even, but it's interesting, right? Because again, I feel like I get it, when people are trying to find quick solutions, we're surgeons, so we really love effective, immediate resolutions or solutions to my problem, which includes, like, okay, well, just tell me, like, can you send me a job posting? Like, I just
Right.
want to apply. I want to apply for the job that you have.
Right.
And when they really hear your story, it's like, okay, you didn't apply for this job
Yeah,
in the
and,
traditional sense.
100%. And, that's hard, especially when our financial future is involved in that, because that's, one, around ego, and two, just around safety and security. So that's why I think, kind of, again, because I had positioned myself so far, I had been doing that for a while before I got
Mhm.
sick. It was like, it just reminded me I have to keep kind of showing up where I can, never to the detriment of my health. And I, even now I have a lot of different roles, but I will say I still take a lot of I take a lot of meetings from my bathtub, and I do a lot of work in my bed. And I am very clear with people. I have a chronic illness. Like, you can't explain everything, but people kind of know what long COVID is. And I'm like, I've been sick for 5 years. And, like, I just, today is a work from home day. And I'm like, I'm able to be productive,
Mhm.
but I have found, I'm not going to apologize. And sometimes, like, my productivity doesn't happen at, like, 7 in the morning like it does at work. Sometimes I feel awful all day, and then at 4 o'clock, a lot of times I'll feel better. So then I'll work from 4 to 8, and, like, the work gets done. And I try to be very clear with people that I do have these chronic illnesses, because I want the people coming up behind me to not feel ashamed or embarrassed. Like, I learned so many people at work have so many chronic illnesses once I started talking about it. And
Mhm.
while I recognize it's hard to do as a younger physician, and certainly as a younger surgeon, like, I feel like I'm in a position where I can talk about it, because I want to normalize. Like, yeah, it's okay to work part-time. When I show up, I'm rested, so I can do a good job, and then I'm going to go home, and you may not hear from me the next day because I'm going to sleep.
Absolutely love it. It reminds me of how every surgeon I know, definitely every female surgeon that I know, their 75%, them giving 70%,
Yes, is
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 everybody else's 200%.
110. Yeah, oh yeah, that may be
Yeah.
even more. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So, like, we're okay. Yeah. Like, I definitely, so I agree with this. Like, your
Yeah.
working hours, don't look like my working hours, mine don't look like the next surgeon's.
Right.
I really think that the more that we, yeah, share these experiences and destigmatize it, normalize it, like you're totally right. And I don't think anything of that with you disclosing like your chronic illness,
Yep.
literally no judgment at all from me. And to your point, I would say a lot of people I know live with chronic illness. It's just,
Yep.
yeah, do they share it or not? Like, is that something they'd ever admit to an employer or not? Or would they mention it online or not? But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned pot specifically just because I went to medical school with a classmate who had POTS. And it
Mm,
was known because like it did just, occasionally come up or
yep.
impact things.
Yeah. Is it actually very interesting? I learned a lot about this syndrome because one of my residents had it. She actually taught me a lot about it. And then, like, I learned a lot from her. But then what's been interesting is there's medical students who've rotated with us in surgery who have found out that I had it, who've called me and said, like, well, can I still be a surgeon? So that we like had a great sit down
Mm,
about it because they didn't have anyone else to ask.
yes, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, those people are lucky to have you as a resource and
Ex-
kind of a safe space.
yeah. Not exactly the resource I saw myself being,
Yeah,
but
that
that's
you
okay. This here we are.
it's funny because in surgery, certainly the age that I came up in, that era, what the culture was where I trained at, there was this sense of like, let even take chronic illness, things like POTS off the table. There was just this sense of like showing truly any weakness, right? Or disclosing that you even like see a therapist. And it
Right.
might not even be for like a diagnosed condition. You could just say like, well, it's helpful to me to talk through my thoughts, something like that, or I'm having a hard year, I see a therapist. We were always discouraged from sharing that at all because it would be used against us. Because then the next time that, somebody gets two pimping questions in a row wrong, it's like, can you really handle this workload? Like, are you studying when you're not at the hospital?
Do you think, Frances May, that that is a symptom of the times, like say the aughts versus like 2010s versus now versus a symptom of a particular program? Or do you think it's a mix?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know. And so
Right.
I can't speak for, I have basically like a couple institutions to pull from just because we rotate, at several schools as a medical student and then train somewhere else. I do think that over the years, I do appreciate there is a real divide between surgery and not
Mhm.
surgery in terms of like the training experience. I think even when you kind of generalize it and zoom way out, I see that as a um there are clear trends there. I guess my question for you would be, have you seen, like, does any of this resonate with you? Or have you just, because I would believe you if you told me, well, I've been at X number of institutions and I've never seen any of that. And then we would
Yeah,
have some more data.
I've been very, like, I feel like I've been very lucky. Like, I went to medical school in Portland, Oregon. I feel like it was just, it's so easy there, you know? It was like, it was so welcoming to whatever anyone was kind of dealing with. And where I went to residency at a community program in Phoenix, I think, had a program director that was very tough, but very fair. She was a woman who'd gone through her own stuff. So, like, even if she didn't love what we were going through, I think she kind of like got it.
Mhm.
Same thing with my fellowship training, particularly, I'm, of course, in hospice and palliative medicine. And now, where I've been working for the last 8 years, the residency program, I couldn't be prouder of it. I mean, I'm just amazed by the program director is a friend of mine. We have a wellness director who's a friend of mine. And I think those residents come with their whole selves. And yeah, sometimes it's messy. Sometimes that whole self, it gets in a messy spot and we just kind of work it out, you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I haven't, but the reality is it's not like I don't know that it exists. I would just say I think it's culture where you are in the country is part of it. Like
Oh,
Oregon
for sure.
obviously is
Yeah,
easy, right?
exactly. And like, we can't divorce the fact that I was in, middle Missouri as
Yeah.
a woman who is Chinese too,
Yeah.
in a very yeah, I mean, exactly, you can't probably tease out all those things, but I guess that at the end of the day, what I think is really important, though, is that stuff like what happened to me and what happened to some of my colleagues where they were at different institutions, but again, were given really poor training experiences, We don't want that to happen anywhere.
Yep.
We wanna bring up the floor just nationally because this is something that, like, should be regulated, and there should be a higher floor on it, as
And
opposed to feeling like you're in the Wild West when you get stranded out at a malignant program.
100%. And I think, unfortunately, like with how the match works, it's like you do your due diligence and then you kind of end up where you end up, unless you clearly don't rank some of these things. But not everyone has that option.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And people say, "Well, if you didn't like it there, then you can leave." But then they
that's
must
not.
not
Yeah,
understand how residency training is structured, because unlike if you don't like your job in the real world and you could just there's more companies out there. There's not this, like, mobility and scarcity issue.
yeah, yeah. You can leave if you want to leave medicine, but if you want to leave to go to another program, it's going to be it's unfortunately very, very challenging. So that's why I think like when we're in positions of some privilege, whether it's age or whether it's not being in that field anymore and having the ability to like just speak loud, I think it's really important to like speak up. So people have like, oh yeah, I saw so and so do this. I can call them. And eventually over time, because I see this in my hospital as a med staff leader, it's like culture, it's so annoying. It's so culture change is like annoying because it's so slow and it truly is one-on-one, but man, it
Yeah,
works. But it's just like everything else, it takes such a lot. It's a long timeline for that to happen.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I love that you're doing it. And again, like, hope, this is how we change culture, just one at a time. It doesn't hurt to be open about our own experiences and kind of destigmatize them, and also to kind of call out poor behavior when we see it.
And be willing to be, I think, again, when you're in that place of some privilege for whatever reason you have it is like being willing to just be a little more vulnerable. So like one of the things I'll do is like especially in the middle of the night, I'll notice like my POTS is bad because I'm tired, standing
Mhm.
still in the OR and really hot. And then I'm stressed because maybe it's a hard case and I'll have to like say, I just say, I'm having a princess moment. Can you like put a cold towel around my neck? Because that kind of breaks the symptoms. And, when I
Mhm.
first did, I felt like really vulnerable and embarrassed. And now I'm like, hey, I have this thing. Can you please do this? And, I don't know what people think. They do it, and I want it to normalize. Like, this is what it is right now. And so I decided that I'm just gonna be a little more vulnerable. One, because like, I wanna feel better, and two, again, because I want to use my own stuff to educate so that more people know about it.
Exactly. People are watching you. Like, people
Yes.
do see that in the room, and so you doing that, yeah, exactly. It gives them an important touch point.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much. This has been, really think, like a very uplifting and inspirational chat. I so appreciate you being open with us. I want to ask if you have any final words of wisdom before we wrap up.
I'm gonna just repeat what I said before, is that, like, if you're in a place of like needing change in your life, I really do believe it is so scary and it is so brave. And I would just say, can you just, instead of beating yourself up, like just focus on that bravery. And then, as you said, Francis May, if you're in a place of change that you didn't choose, an old therapist of mine used to say, what you resist will persist. So just like lean into it because it's going to happen regardless.
Absolutely love that. Also think of the Cormac McCarthy quote, "You never know what worse luck your bad luck has saved you from."
Oof, I love that one.
So amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. That was awesome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a review. Until next time, try to embrace some change in your life where it arises.